For decades, the image of Africa we have in the developed world has been coloured by pictures of misery, war, famine, disease. But as countries across the continent grow increasingly prosperous through high prices for commodities and natural resources, there are also signs that governments are trying to tackle the man-made problems of corruption and bad government. Malawi has a fairly new president, Joyce Banda, one of only 2 women heads of state ever from Africa. She came into office and scrapped the presidential jet, selling off some of the perks of power. Malawi is one of the poorest countries in the world, with around 3/4 of the population living on less than $1 a day. Until last year, relations with many Western countries had soured, aid schemes had been frozen, and corruption was at the heart of economic life.
I, Joyce Untitled Banda.
Enter President Joyce Banda. As well as the presidential jet, the fleet of 60 Mercedes cars bought by the previous president have been ditched. Mrs. Banda says she's used to hitchhiking. She brought in tough economic reforms, and the currency has been devalued by 1/3 to try to kickstart the economy, although this has caused big protests. One thing she hasn't scrapped is the country's strong relationship with China. As in other parts of Africa, Beijing is now a key player in Malawi, and it's not difficult to see examples of Chinese investment all around. However, Malawi still has important ties with Britain. A couple of days ago, President Banda was at the David Livingstone Centre just outside Glasgow to mark the bicentenary of the Scottish missionary's birth. And she's trying to drum up support to help rebuild her country's fragile economy. Earlier today in London, I was able to have a few words with her. Madam President, do you think those of us in the West sometimes misunderstand Africa? We see the bad news. We hear about the wars, we see famines. We don't see the economic development and the local entrepreneurs like yourself, actually.
I think what I would like to say is that the world needs to appreciate that Africa is not all the bad news they see on the Western media. Africa has a lot of opportunity. In Africa, you find good leadership all the way down to grassroots level. Yes, in a country like Malawi, there's abject poverty. People living on 50% of the people living on $1 a day. That is why the West needs to come in and partner with us. We don't want the West to come and tell us what to do.
Is China a good partner for you as well because of the way in which they do business in Africa, which is different perhaps from the way the Europeans do business?
The West and China are partners that have come into Africa. They've taken different approaches, but at the end of the day, those that benefit are Africans. So I would not want to criticize China or to criticize the West. China has come, for example, in Malawi, they've given us both grants and loans, just like the World Bank has done, just like the IMF has done.
I've heard people in other developing countries say, we like dealing with the Chinese because it's a business relationship. They're not the old colonial powers. And also, they don't lecture in the way that the Europeans sometimes do about human rights and other things. And that is a very different relationship. Is that true?
I, personally, as Malawi, shall take aid from the West with its conditions and meet those conditions because the money belongs to the West. But I shall also deal with the Chinese. I hope that we never get to a point where it's a condition from any part of the world to say we will only give you aid if you don't deal with the Chinese. That must never happen.
But I was wondering if Britain, for example, and other European countries could learn from the Chinese and the way in which they deal with you in Africa, if you think that would be a positive thing, that Britain could learn from some of this.
They deal with you as a partner. They don't impose most of the strict rules that maybe a Western country would do. The Chinese are more lenient. The Chinese respect African countries. That's how we feel.
Can I ask you about your leadership? Because you're remarkable, because you're a woman leader in Africa, and there's only been one other woman president in Africa. Do you think you're judged by a different standard? Do you think it's been particularly difficult because you're a woman? It's been a rough old year for you, hasn't it, the past year?
Yeah, it has been rough, but it has been rough because I've been cleaning up the mess that I found. I think it would have been different if I had found a thriving economy and everything was fine. But I got into office when the economy had collapsed, literally. And so we had to get back on track. To get back on track, we needed to make some very bold decisions. Bold decisions that resulted in some negative impact on the poor. And therefore, we had also to come up with the social programs that cushioned that shock. So that cannot be easy, whether you are a man or a woman. And stay the course I will, even if it costs me the next elections. Because I must do what I think is best for the people of Malawi, including selling the presidential jet. Sometimes I go to conferences with fellow African leaders, and I'm the only one traveling by commercial flight. And as well as reducing my salary by 30%. It meant very little, but at the end of the day, all I wanted to demonstrate to my fellow Malawians is that I'm prepared to suffer with them.
I was going to quote to you what one woman said, not a fan, you know her very well, Calista Mutarika, who said, "You're just a market woman selling fritters." That's not a very sisterly thing to say.
But that's okay. That's okay. She's fine. I mean, she's right. Because I've spent my life, 30 years of my life, empowering rural women, including herself.
So you see this as a compliment?
Yeah. In fact,
to be a market woman.
In fact, Malawian women, because 3/4 of Malawians, 85% to be exact, are rural people. And the 3/4 of the women that I've worked with are market women. So if I am aligned with the majority of women who have to struggle every day, sit in the market, come sun, come rainfall, that's fine. That's my mission.
Madam President, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much indeed.